Hey everyone, it's Jake at Jake's Metal Chat. Hope you're all well and welcome to episode 82 of my Metal Vault, where I will be exploring and showing you my favorite albums within heavy metal to thrash metal to death metal, black metal, doom metal, sludge metal, folk metal, you name it, all of that excellent stuff. As well as talking about the albums, I will also be talking about the band, so a brief history and any releases leading up to the album that I have picked. And this album that I'm talking about here has definitely stood the test of time, and of course, we lost the legend, the man behind the vocals for this band, for all of the albums he was on. Lost him very recently this month. So, this is a tribute to Tomas Lindberg of At the Gates. And if you heard At the Gates, you will know his vocals straight away, but he's been in countless other bands before and after. And I thought there were so many albums I could have picked, especially from the 90s for this band. And I decided to go with the one that I think a lot of you would have started with. So without further ado, I have this on CD as well as vinyl. So let's talk about this album right here. So At the Gates with Slaughter of the Soul. And this is just a melodic death metal masterpiece. It's just a masterpiece overall. Of course, right here we got the back of the album. Of course, released by R.I.P Records, the label they were on at that time. Of course, have the CD right here, which I will show a bit more later on when talking about this album. But a fantastic album overall. Just Thomas's vocals on this are absolutely brilliant, insane. Everything's just from start to finish incredible. But before I talk about the band themselves, let's show some of the lyrics here. And of course, got the band right there. Got Thomas right there in the middle. He may be gone, but I've said this before, those who have since passed away within the metal scene, they may be gone, but their legacy does live on. And Thomas's legacy lives on definitely in this album and the ones before and after. But anyway, before talking about this album in its entirety and the songs, let's talk about the band itself. So, At the Gates, where are they from? Well, they are from Gothenburg, Sweden. They formed in 1990 under the Dwellers at the Gates of Silent Memory. That is a long name for a band. I mean, there's a lot of. Oh, excuse me. There's a lot of long names for bands, like, for example, Wolves in the Throne Room, just to name one. As I just saw this name, and I thought, well, that's a really long name, and it's named after a band's song. And yeah, and then shortened it to At the Gates in 1990, so the same year, and they were a band from that year to 96, and then reformed in 2007 to 2008, and then reformed in 2010 to now. And around 2008, they would have played Vakken, Bloodstock, and I think Hellfest as well. For anyone who went there, feel free to comment down below. And along with At the Gates, there was Dark Tranquillity and also In Flames, who pioneered, which is what is now known as melodic death metal, or the Gothenburg sound as it's from the city. And you'll know that sound as soon as you hear it. And yeah, all started with those three bands. So before I continue on with At the Gates, Thomas, along with the original guitarist for At the Gates, Elf, were also Elf. Let's get up his last name. Where is it? Svensson, I think that's pronounced. You might have gotten that wrong, so I do apologize. They were also in this band, which I will get up very briefly. And let's find them. There we go. Grotesque, which were a band from 1988 to 1990 and then 1996. So that's when At the Gates split up the first time. And then once again in 2007 when they did a one-off show. Whoever was lucky enough to see that, I'm gutted. I'm jealous of you guys and was gutted I couldn't see that. But it was long before I found out who these guys were. So they were more different, so death and black metal. And this is of course, the compilation from 96 called In the Embrace of Evil, which of course has the demos Ripped from the Cross, The Black Gate is Closed, and the Incantation EP, which are all really cool releases to listen to. So, of course, when this band split up in 1990, we had At the Gates. So, their first demo, which I have right here, Gardens of Grief, was released sometime in 1991. It was an independent release. This is the CD version. Who was this released by? Black Sun Records. And not sure. Black Sun Records. There we go. So one in 1995 and then one in 2000. Not sure which one's mine's from. 95. So this was their first release. I got this from a mate of mine. Of course, the case is a little broken, so I do apologize. So let's see if I can. Yeah, so there's a nice band picture of the guys right there. CD's upside down, so I'm gonna do that. But a nice little release, nice little release there. Of course, the logo's a little different. So that was their earliest logo. And I say this is a bit more on the death doom metal side. It's got that doom sound to it. And of course, Thomas's iconic vocals. And joining them, of course, we got Adrian on drums and we got Anders on guitar and on bass, his brother Jonas. Or Jonas. I'm trying to think if it's said the same way as Johan. But of course, those two, are twins who were also in bands back in the day. One with Tom was called Infestation, and of course, The Haunted. They formed when At the Gates took that hiatus from 96 to 2007. But yeah, this was their first release. And definitely a lot different from what they started going into later on. And of course, we got their debut here. The Red in the Sky is Ours, which was released on Death Records, the Peacefield sub-label. When I first heard this, I was like, yeah, this is just some really, really cool stuff right here. Of course, the logo right there, changed it again to this, which is a very iconic logo. Mine's a re-release right here, so mine in 2003 on Peaceville, but originally released in 1992, so definitely one that people should definitely check out if you've not listened to it yet. And of course, that kicks off their full lengths. And then we get to 1993 with their second album, and equally a excellent album as well, with Fear I Kiss the Burning Darkness, also released on Peaceville / Death Records, and was the last album to feature Alf on guitar before he went on to do tattoos, to become a tattooist. And Matty of Dismember, Matty, did some guest vocals on track number 10, which is, where is it? Ever Opening Flower. And again, just a brilliant, brilliant album. Definitely one. Of course, the one I'm talking about, if that's the one you checked out first, then definitely go back to their first two albums and then and carry on from there. So that's with Fear I Kiss the Burning Darkness. And in 1994, so a year later, so these albums came out within a year of each other. So again, the third album from 1994, Terminal Spirit Disease, which is just carrying on that excellent melodic death metal sound and, carrying on that heaviness. Of course, again, released on Peaceful because they were on that label for a good long while. And this is the first one to feature Martin on guitar. Of course, he joined the band after Alf left. And of course, you see him on the Headbangers Ball special along with Anathema and My Dying Bride. Of course, these three were known as the Peaceville. Was it? No, My Dying Bride, Anathema, and Paradise Lost were the Peaceville three. But it was these guys and those two bands that did that tour, did that show at the Rock City venue in Nottingham, which I have been to before. It's a cool venue. So yeah, another album that people should definitely check out. If you're more into your Melodeath, this is definitely for you. This is a band for you. So let's talk about again. So Gardens of Grief, Red in the Sky's Hours, With Fear I Kiss the Burning Darkness, Terminal Spirit Disease. And before I get onto the album that we are talking about, the other album I own, which I don't have the others yet, and this is their 2014 release, At War with Reality. And it was their first album for a very long time. And I haven't heard it in a while, but from when I heard it the first time, it was a very good record, very good comeback album for them. And yeah, still bringing that same level of aggression they brought back in 1990. And Thomas's vocals still on point and just gone a step higher, I think. And I think it all started with this one right here. So let's get on with the album in question. So this came out in 1995. Like I said, this was released on the 14th of April of that year. Of course, Slaughter of the Soul. Now, what can I say about this album that hasn't already been said by various others within the VC? It is just a stellar record. One of my all-time favorite albums within metal in general, and one of my favorites to come out in 1995. So, of course, we have Thomas on vocals, Anders and Jonas on guitar, Anders on guitar, Jonas on bass, Adrian on drums, and Martin on guitar. And we got Andy on lead guitar for track 3. Now, Andy, I'm not going to try and say his last name, but a lot of you will know him because he is the guitarist and still the guitarist till this day, 40 years on, for King Diamond, who did lead guitar on the third track, which I'll get into in a bit. But in terms of who did what, so we got Frederick Nordstrom on who produced this, I will just check very quickly because I'm fairly sure he's done other bands that we know. He's in Dream Evil. Everyone knows Dream Evil. Everyone will know the song, primarily the Book of Heavy Metal. Yeah, he's done a lot of bands. So, of course, this band right here. Who else has he done? Arch Enemy, another big band within Sweden. What else have we got here? That I know. I'm not going to dwell on this too long. Ceremonial Oath, another band that a lot of you will know. Crystal Eyes, Crystal Age, Dark Tranquility, Delane, Dimmu Borgir, Dream Evil, his own band. Yeah, this goes on. This is Hammerfall, another band which I think some of those members were in death metal bands back in the early days, and of course In Flames for their demos and the two albums I own, Lunar Strain and The Jester Race. So in very good hands with that producer right there, Noel Summerfield. was a producer, did, of course, with Fear I Kiss the Burning Darkness, this one, of course, Axe Grinder, Banished for their Deliver Me Unto Pain, Bolt for Realm of Chaos, and for Victory, and which was I think a compilation from 2017, and Carcass, Symphonies of Sickness, and Swanson, and of course Cathedral as well. So again, very good hands with Noel. And of course, we got Thomas and Bjorn doing photographs and Christian doing the artwork. So he was in a band called Diabolical and also was the guitarist in Grotesque, along with Thomas and Alf. And Layers in Wait. And of course, did Elegy for Amorphous, Elements for Atheist, and the last few releases for Bathory. And yeah, again, in good hands with some great names right there. So let's talk about this album, let's talk about songs. What songs do we have here? So it all kicks off with this buzzy, like they're trying to sort out like a radio, television, that sort of sound, like an interference, and then you got like clanging like pipes and bells, and then you get Thomas going, "We are blind with the world within us, waiting to be born," and then it just kicks right in, and this off the bat, just straight in, no, literally just you got like you're thinking like it's like, oh, what's gonna happen here? And all of a sudden it's like you get you get all those instruments in, and just intense. And then you got the title track, Slaughter of the Soul, still bringing that aggression. And then you got, just Thomas going for it with his vocals. Just his performance on this album is just incredible. His performances on the very first three albums, and of course the Gardens of Grief demo, are just as noteworthy here. But his performance on it, he was like, because a lot of musicians do it, they're like, what can I do better? And he just went like, I'm gonna just keep pushing myself. And he pushed himself, I think, to the absolute limit right here and achieved what he achieved on this album, along with the rest of the guys. And Slaughter Soul is definitely a song that a lot of you within the VC will know, and of course, a lot of you newcomers within metal. If you heard At the Gates, you probably heard that song for the very first time, or it might have been the first track, or it might have been the third track, which has Andy from King Diamond doing the solo for Cold. So you got, again, nice fast paced song, like bit mid tempo at points. Thomas's vocals throughout this entire album is immense, and and then it's got that little acoustic bit in between with a little bit of drumming right there, and then it just kicks in with Andy's guitar solo, and it just fits the song so perfectly. And then we get onto another song which has become a favorite of mine, called Under a Serpent's Sun, which, like I said, it changes from like going like fast in your face, like Blinded by Fear, to something like that, to Cold and this song, and then just the album just goes up and down, but it's never a dull moment. Under the Serpent's Sun definitely gives it that mixture of that punching fastness on the guitars, the bass, and the drums, and the aggression of Thomas's vocals. And then it just slows down a little bit, and then Into the Dead Sky, Into the Dead Sky more is an instrumental track. Well, it says instrumental here, but there are lyrics here, so it's like a mixture right here. But when I looked here, it said instrumental. So instrumental to start with, and then it kicks in with some vocals towards the end. And then we got the sixth track, Suicide Nation. Again, another heavy, punchy track. And when I heard that Thomas passed away, this was the first album that I was thinking of to put on to pay tribute to him. And this album has so many brilliant, brilliant songs on this. And of course, I'll say my favorites at the end. And then to finish off this entire album, because all these songs have that same level of like mid-tempo, fast aggression, excellent solos and guitar riffage, bass lines, drumming, everything. So we got World of Lies as track number 7, bringing more of the same, along with track number 8, Unto Others, which which is, you know, carrying on that fast pace, mid tempo, like especially these last few ones. So track number 9, Nausea, and then track number 10, Need, and then to finish off track number 11, which is The Flames of the End, which just perfectly ends this album right here. And like I said, there are albums that I've spoken about where it's all had that same amount of tempo. So you got fast aggression, you got mid tempo, and you just got slow, heavy parts or slow melodic parts. And my favorite tracks on here, definitely tracks number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6. Definitely my top favorites on this album. But if I was to pick like two, I would definitely want. I mean, this whole album I would definitely would put on for a gym session. Is definitely one for that. But ones I've had on my walks most are Blinded by Fear, Slaughter of the Soul, and Cold. So that's all the songs. And like I said, this album has stood the test of time for 30 years. This album is nearly 30 years old come the 14th of November. So that's literally 2 months away. So nearly 30 years of melodic death metal. And again, I mentioned before, Thomas may be gone, but his legacy lives on. Because like me and everyone else, it hit us all hard when we found out he passed away. And I'm so glad and that I got to see him perform on stage and got to see him in at the gates. And I hope these guys do continue on and keep Thomas's legacy and his just his overall presence in that band alive. Just keeping his memory alive. And like I said, his performance on this is just pure perfection. One of my favorite performances of his on an album. And one of my other favorites, of course, is going to be the debut. Because he definitely has a lot of emotion in his vocals, and it shows when he does the screams, and he's just screaming to let all that anger and frustration out. And then and when you see him live, you're the head banging, moshing, or even when you're at home or out for a jog or at the gym on the treadmill, and you're just listening to this album in its entirety. You're getting all that anger, frustration, and stresses of the day out, and it's definitely an album that can do that, and definitely one that a lot of metalheads will put in their top 5, top 10, maybe top 20 list, and it's definitely on my list. So my overall conclusion, I say a lot of the same things if you've seen this series. It's heavy, it's of course it's melodic, it's beautifully executed, well produced, well engineered, well mixed. just all the guitars, bass, drums, vocals, all just complement each other from start to finish. And I mentioned masterpiece already, but it's a timeless masterpiece, and it will be that for forever. Let's see how see this last another 30 years. Well, I mean, it will last. Stumbling my words here. It will stand the test of time still. But yeah, it's nearly 30 years old, so getting close to that 30-year mark. And if At the Gates is a band you haven't checked out and you've just watched this entire video from start to finish and you're thinking you want to check this one out first, then go for it. I think again this was an introduction to a lot of metalheads, and I think for me, I've seen them live, and of course I think this is the album that I saw on most metalheads shirts was this album. I thought I'll check this out and was completely blown away, and of course checked out the very first album too. So to recap, heavy, melodic, well executed, well produced, well mixed and mastered, timeless masterpiece, and just incredible. At the Gates and Slaughter of the Soul. And that is it for another episode of My Metal Vault. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for tuning in and also paying respects to Tomas Lindberg. All of my thoughts and love go out to his family, his friends, and of course his bandmates. And I hope you guys can continue on. If any of you are watching this, I hope you guys can continue on and keep his memory alive. And of course, his legacy lives on in the albums that he has left behind. So with, of course, Grotesque, At the Gates, and of course the amount of other bands he's been in, The Crown, Lock Up, just to name a couple. You know, he's left his mark, and we as a entire scene, well, all of us within the metal scene, all of us within the VC, we thank you, Tomas Lindberg. I've been Jake at Jake's Metal Chat. Keep that banner of metal well and truly high, and I'll see you all again in another episode of My Metal Vault. Rest in peace, Thomas. You'll never be forgotten.